In the last video, we learned about variables in Python, what variables are and what are data types. So now let's dive a little deeper into variables and see how we can use them into our code. So let's declare some variables. Let's make x equals to 10, y equals to 20. And first of all, as we saw in the previous video, we can just print these variables using a simple print statement. So maybe using the format string, we'll print x equals to x. So as we can see, it prints x equals to 10 because the value of x is 10. Now, but this is very basic, right? So how can we do more interesting stuff with variables? So let's learn about expressions. In Python, expressions are statements that resolve to a value. So for example, if we write z equals to x plus y, so now x plus y over here is an expression. This whole thing is an expression. So what it does is it stores the value of x plus y into z. So this is as straightforward as it looks. And if we print the value of z, we'll get 30, 10 plus 20. And expressions not only work with variables, but also with literal statements. So we can also write 60 as a literal over here. So in Python, inside of an expression, we can use two things. Either we can use a variable or we can use a literal. So a literal is just writing out the variable, whether a string or a boolean as it is. So like this. So these things over here, the string ASDF, the value true, the boolean true, and the integer 10, they are all literals because they are not stored inside a variable. So these can also be used in expressions, and you can also use variables. Variables can have literal values stored inside of them. So now if we just go ahead again and then print this, we get 90. Now one more thing, as you might have noticed, since these things are called variables, you can change the value inside them. So over here x has the value 10. Now if I write over here again x equals 30, what do you think would be the output? 110. You see why? Because now even though I have written x equal to 10 at the top of the file, what happens is that when we write x equal to 30 again, the new value 30 gets stored inside of x and the old value is replaced. So these are very simple expressions. Expressions can also get a bit more complex, like we can have 50 into 10 divided by 2. So these type of expressions follow the general board mass rules of maths, and you would get the answer 55.0. So as you can see, what happened was it divided the 10 by 2 first and then it added it to 50. But why did it become a float? As we can see, all of these things are a string, right? And even 10 divided by 2 gives us a 5, which can fit into an integer. But still we got 55.0 because in Python, the division operator always returns a float. So if you just remove this plus 50 even, you will see that we'll get 5.0 and not just 5. If you want to get an integer, you can use the floor division operator. The floor division divide this dividend by the divisor and then rounds it down to the lowest to the nearest integer. So now what we'll get an integer, and if the number does not divide it completely, we'll still get an integer, and it just ignores the remainder. So let's see what all different operators we have in Python. So this was the floor division. You all guys already saw the plus and the division. Similarly, that's also a minus, which is just subtraction. There is a modulo operator, so which gives you the remainder after dividing. So now you would get 1. since when you divide 10 by 3, you get 1 as a remainder. And there are also other operators there. Those are called bitwise operators. Like you can have z equals to 10, and so what this gives you is, this gives you the bitwise AND operation between the binary representation of 2 and the binary representation of 10. So we'll learn more about bitwise operators in a future video, but for now you can you can remember this basic operators. There is also a multiplication sign, which is the star sign. So you also have multiplication. So now you'll get 100. So these are all about the basic operators. Now, to make things a little more interesting, since we learned about data types in the last video, what do you think would happen if we try to mismatch the data types in our operations? So let's keep z equals to x plus y, and if you see, we are getting 30, which is what is expected. Now let's make one of them a float instead. Now what do you think would happen? So whenever you perform an operation between an integer and a float in Python, the result is always a float. So the z was by default converted to a float when we tried to add an integer and a float. So now let's spice things up a little bit more. Let's try to make y a string. So now what do you think would happen? We are trying to add an integer with a string this time. Let's see, just go ahead and see what happens. So as you can see, Python gives you an error. It says that no, you cannot add a string with a integer, because obviously it does not make any sense. So now let's try something even more fun. Let's try to multiply this, and let's make it 3 and not 10. So now that you guys have seen that when we try to add an integer and a string, Python does not let us do that. So what do you guys think would happen when we try to multiply an integer with a string? Will Python let us do it? See, now what happens is the string is repeated 3 times, because the multiplication operator can also be used with an integer and a string. And what it does is it just multiplies the string the number of times, it just repeats the string the number of times the other operator. So this is a very handy operator when you want to do stuff like print a long string of dashes. Maybe you have 2 dashes and then you just multiply it by 10. So now you print 20 dashes instead. You don't have to type out all of those things here. So this is one more thing that you can do. Now let's also add in another variable, which is a boolean. So let's try to add a boolean. Let's try to multiply a int with a boolean. Let's see what happens. So what happened? It still gave us 3. So why is that? Because booleans are equivalent to 0 and 1 when considering them in operations with integers. So if you were to add x plus a, which seems a little counterintuitive since x is an integer and a is a boolean. So you when you say it out loud, or maybe let's actually write this in literals. So let's write 3 plus true. So now reading this in English does not make any sense. How can you add 3 plus true? But if you run it, it gives you an answer 4, because true is considered as a 1 when using it with integers. You can also do it with false, and that would be considered a 0. So you will get 3. So it's 3 plus 0 basically. You can also do and multiplication over here and you will get 0. So great. Now you know how to do operations with expressions in Python and also use different data types like integer, a string, a boolean, and a float, and how also you can mix and match these different data types in your expressions to get various results. But before we end this video, uh, all that we have been doing till now is writing the values of those variables by hand. But those are not very fun, right? What if you want the user to give the value for a variable? So for that, we have a function called input in Python. So if we say, let's say k equals to input input, enter your name, and then let's actually print this above as well. And over here, let's just print k. So now if you see this, we are given a prompt, enter your name. And if we write any name over here, something like maybe Alex, then you get your name printed over here again. So now this time we did not write this Alex anywhere in code. Instead, we got the value for this variable during runtime by the input from the user. Now, this is fun, right? So maybe you can make a simple calculator. Maybe you can do something like you can have k equals to something, then j equals to another number, enter a number instead, and then we just print the sum of those numbers. So we just print k plus j. You can write expressions anywhere, so you can write expressions over here inside this curly braces also. The expressions do not just have to be after equal to sign. Before we run this code, what do you guys think would happen? Okay, let's do it. So let's enter 5, let's enter 6. So I'll also give you two options. Do you think it would print 11, which it should actually, or would it print 56? See, it printed 56. And why is that? Even though we told the user to enter a number and we also entered a number, and when we tried to add those two numbers, we are getting 56. That is because by default, the function input, what it does is it gets a string from the user. So even though we are entering 5 over here, which we think is a number, the input is returning this as not a 5 like this, but a 5 like this, the string 5. You see? So that is why when we try to add 5 plus 6, what we are actually adding is we are adding 5 plus 6 like this. And when we do that, actually I did not mention this case before, but when we try to add two strings, we just concatenate them. So we put one after the other. So then we get 56. So, but we don't want this behavior, right? So what do we actually do? So here comes in type conversion. So type conversion means you can convert a data type in Python to another data type using inbuilt functions. So what we do is if we get this, now what we do, we just do k equals to int k, and then we do j equals to int j. So now what we have done is, these are the type conversion functions. We'll learn more about them in a later video. What we have done basically is we are telling that take the value of k, convert it to an integer, and then put that value back into k. So now if we run the same code again and we again type 5 and 6, this time we'll get 11, because now j and k over here are integers and not strings. And just one more interesting thing, in Python you can also chain functions. So by chaining, what it means, like you can write int over here itself. You don't have to do it on a separate line. So what this would do is the output of the input function will be given as an input to the int function, and the output of that function will finally be assigned to k. So this is just the exact same thing. It is just a shorthand way to write this. We are still getting a proper numerical addition. This way, it's just a little less messy and less verbose. So now that you guys know what expressions are, how to use variables in our code, and how to also get variables from the user during runtime, in the next video, we'll see about more data types of Python, the collection data types that we talked about in the previous video, the list, the dictionary, and set and other stuff. And we'll also dive deeper into type conversion. So let's end this video over here. Thanks for watching.